Standard store receipts are coated in a chemical called bisphenol A, or BPA. It allows text to be activated entirely by heat, serving as a transparent, heat-sensitive alternative to traditional ink. Grabbing that paper barehanded allows the chemical to cross the dermal barrier. If you happen to use hand sanitizer or skin lotion before taking it, those lipid-soluble liquids act as a high-speed vehicle, pulling the BPA directly into your bloodstream. This chart reveals the specific physiological toll of that chemical. Clinical studies tracking adolescent boys with high BPA exposure found their testosterone levels plummeting by a full 50% during a critical window of sexual development. The highest biological burden falls on retail cashiers. Handling these strips of thermal paper hundreds of times a shift drives their systemic BPA levels exponentially higher than the general public. A routine financial transaction effectively forces unwitting participants to absorb endocrine disruptors that actively suppress healthy hormonal function. That exposure vector follows us directly into the kitchen. The dark, rigid plastic containers routinely used for restaurant takeout carry an entirely different chemical payload. Black plastic is notoriously difficult for optical sorting machines to identify at recycling plants. To meet demand, manufacturers frequently produce it using melted-down recycled electronic waste. Electronics are packed with heavy brominated flame retardants by law to prevent them from catching fire. When those old laptops and keyboards are repurposed into food containers, those cancer-causing compounds end up sitting right next to your dinner. Adding hot or highly acidic food to these containers acts as a chemical accelerant. The heat and acid aggressively leach hormone-disrupting phthalates and flame retardants straight out of the plastic and into the meal. These ingested chemicals act as endocrine disruptors, mimicking or blocking the hormones that signal the body where to store energy. This interference tricks the brain into prioritizing the accumulation of visceral fat around the organs rather than storing it in healthy adipose tissue. The modern supply chain of quick food delivery quietly feeds us the toxic runoff of the industrial electronics industry. Visceral fat is distinct from the soft subcutaneous tissue you can pinch at your waistline. It wraps tightly around your internal organs and operates as a highly active mass, continuously secreting inflammatory cytokines deep inside your body. This diagram maps its relentless metabolic loop. Unlike standard fat stores that hold calories for later use, visceral fat constantly breaks down triglycerides, pumping free fatty acids directly into your system. That constant stream of fatty acids disrupts the insulin signal. Under normal conditions, insulin triggers the liver and muscles to absorb glucose, but the excess fat molecules essentially mute that message, leaving the glucose stranded. The signal never connects. Glucose builds to dangerous levels in the blood, while starving the organs that actually need the fuel. You experience this internal starvation as sudden energy crashes, dense brain fog, and chronic lethargy. This deep tissue fat short-circuits your core energy management system. It traps you in an exhausting cycle of fatigue, while simultaneously doubling the risk of early mortality. The modern medical response increasingly relies on passivity. Patients eliminate visceral fat by suppressing their appetite with GLP-1 weight loss drugs or executing extreme caloric restriction. Dropping weight without heavily prioritizing protein intake and rigorous resistance training triggers a severe biological penalty. The body cannibalizes its own skeletal muscle mass alongside the fat. Outsourcing your metabolism to a passive pharmaceutical solution strips the fat, but leaves your physical frame atrophied, fragile, and unprotected against future decline. Take a look at this graph. Dr. Rhonda Patrick advocates shifting focus from simply living longer to maximizing peak span. Most baseline biological markers peak around age 25. Peak span is the deliberate effort of staying within 90% of that apex capacity for decades. Preserving cognitive function requires heavy friction. London taxi drivers spend years actively memorizing thousands of streets to pass a grueling test. That intense, novel learning physically enlarges their memory centers, building a cognitive reserve that defends against fluid intelligence decay. Defending your physical capacity requires exactly 5 hours of aerobic exercise a week, structured heavily around high-intensity interval training to force the heart and lungs to adapt under pressure. When executed consistently, clinical data shows this precise volume of aerobic training can reverse cardiovascular aging by up to 20 years. You cannot retain optimal capacity by accident. It demands exposing the body and the brain to deliberate, structured stress. Reclaiming your baseline requires an immediate environmental purge. Throw out the black plastic takeout containers, refuse physical thermal receipts, and only store hot food in inert materials like glass or stainless steel. Internally, utilize intermittent fasting to deplete liver glycogen and force a metabolic switch into ketosis. This state activates mitophagy, a cleanup mechanism where healthy cells actively hunt down and dissolve their own damaged mitochondria. Systematically purging environmental toxins and building physical resilience provides a documented path toward protecting your biological capacity in a toxic environment. Subscribe to the CEO Brief and comment if meritocracy can survive a toxic infrastructure.